What is going on, everyone? Today I'm just in the garden today cleaning up some of these tomatoes because we've got quite a lot of production happening and we need to get some of this lower foliage removed. We did just do a video on the importance of removing lower foliage and what that can do for your tomatoes, but that's not the topic of today's video. Now, when I was here, I saw some of these beautiful San Marzano tomatoes forming. They're just loaded up. I mean, it's just unbelievable how heavy some of these tomatoes are on the plant. It reminded me that around this time we get asked a very common question, and that is, Luke, my tomatoes are splitting. Why? And so in today's episode, we're going to talk all about reasons why your tomatoes are splitting and how to prevent it. Let's go. The first reason why your tomatoes are splitting is because of infrequent watering. You see, tomatoes have a dangerous combination of thin skin and high moisture content. If any one of those two were different, they wouldn't split. And that's because tomatoes with their thin skin, all it takes is a sudden burst of moisture for the tomato to essentially swell with that extra moisture, causing it to split. Now, it can happen as the tomatoes are just starting to ripen, but more often it happens as you're preparing to take it off the plant. You might think to yourself, boy, this tomato looks beautiful. It looks beautiful, but might it be even more beautiful if I leave it on just one more day? You know what I'm talking about. You know that phase where it's just like, I could pull it off, but maybe it could just use one more day for that perfection, right? And you come out the next day, and to your shock and to your worst nightmares, they've split. And that's because of heavy dew last night, or maybe you decided to water, or maybe you got an overnight rain shower, and all of a sudden those tomatoes have all cracked. Why? Well, it's because as they're ripening, that skin is so thin that it just all of a sudden swells with water and it ruptures, it cracks. And that cracking cannot be cured. Once a tomato cracks, it cannot be uncracked. It essentially will rot very quickly after that. Fruit flies will get in, or flies will get in, and mold will also start to form. And so it's really difficult to essentially have a long shelf life on a tomato that cracks. So by watering more frequently, what's going to happen is it's going to slowly expand that tomato. As the tomato gets more water, it's going to expand. And so rather than letting it go bone dry and then water, and then bone dry and then water, not only are you going to reduce your risk of blossom end rot, which happens with infrequent watering, but it also is going to reduce your chances of splitting. And so I'd highly recommend doing that. The second thing you can do is you can add a little more calcium. By adding slightly more calcium, what you're going to do is you're going to ensure that the cell wall, because the skin of a tomato is so thin, you're going to ensure that the cell wall that makes up the tomato skin, which is so thin as it is just that much more rigid and thick. We talked about a couple of videos ago when we were talking about preventing blossom end rot. We talked about how the best way to prevent blossom end rot is to frequently watering inconsistencies. But we talked about how blossom end rot is caused by a lack of calcium. Now, the calcium is found in your soil. And if a tomato plant is showing no signs of blossom end rot, chances are there's no calcium deficiency. But adding a few extra percentages of available calcium in your soil can help that much more to strengthen the leaves, strengthen the stems, but also strengthen the skin of the tomato. There doesn't have to be a deficiency for there to be a benefit with adding some calcium. You know what I'm saying? You can have enough to get by, and then you can have a little bit extra for the benefit. And that's really what I'm trying to get at, is by adding a little bit extra calcium, whether that's from adding something like gypsum, whether that's from adding crushed eggshells, which does take a little bit of time for that to break down in your soil, or we just add Trifecta Plus. Trifecta Plus is balanced with gypsum. It's got a little bit of dolomitic lime for pH balance. Which has lots of calcium in it. It also is rich in bone meal, which has lots of calcium. So there's lots of different calcium sources found in Trifecta. That's what we use. But any fertilizer that has calcium, CalMag is another great option. It's calcium and magnesium. You can get a fertilizer called CalMag. And there are so many different calcium supplements that you can add to just add that additional little bump of calcium in your soil. And that will help to strengthen the skin around the tomato so that even if there's that sudden burst of water, it adds a little more of that elasticity, right? A little more of that elasticity. Think of it like this. If you've ever, well, we've all been kids, but if you've ever been a kid that has had a water balloon fight, take a water balloon, only fill it up a quarter of the way. Then take a water balloon and fill it up halfway. And then take a water balloon and fill it up all the way with water. Have you ever been filling a water balloon up and it just popped right in your hand because you overfilled it? Well, that's what happens to these tomatoes. You see, if you were to have a tomato that is a quarter full of water, chuck it at your friend, it'll leave a welt. The thing doesn't break. It just smacks the skin. And I've gotten bruises from water balloons that are only partially filled with water because they don't pop. Half full hurts like the dickens, but it still pops. Then they're so full that you go to throw the water balloon and it just pops in your hand and backfires and gets you all wet. That's why your tomatoes are cracking at a later stage in their life. And that's because the skin is like the outside of the balloon, or it's the balloon itself, I should say, and it's getting so thin as it's being stretched. It's getting thinner and thinner and thinner and thinner to the point where it just can't hold on. And so that additional little calcium is just that additional little bit of skin or balloon that keeps it from popping and cracking. The third thing you can do to preventing your tomatoes from cracking is selecting more crack-resistant varieties of tomatoes. So in this bed here, we've got our whole bed filled with fairly crack-resistant tomatoes. The reason why is because we're not here all that often. Because we're not here all that often, they don't always get the water as frequently as we'd like. And because infrequent watering can lead to cracking, I wanted to have a tad bit more forgiveness and a little bit of insurance by planting varieties that were just less likely to crack. So all of these varieties here are bush-style determinate tomatoes. Now, not all bush-style determinate tomatoes are going to be crack-resistant, but many of them are. Ace 55, Wisconsin 55, your Roma tomatoes, your San Marzano tomatoes, they're all fairly crack-resistant. Rio Grande is another great paste tomato option. You really want to go with those crack-resistant varieties if you're not around your garden all that often and you get those infrequent waterings, or if you just want to give yourself, like I said, a little more forgiveness, a little bit more insurance. So those varieties, if you do your research, are going to be great because they're not going to be as prone to cracking as others. They just tend to have a slightly thicker skin. That's really what it comes down to. It's like we talked about, the skin, because it's so thin, when it expands with water, it can sometimes expand too fast and it can crack. So these varieties tend to have a slightly thicker skin. Makes them a little bit better for paste or sauce or slicing. They might not be quite as good for fresh eating right off the plant. I still will, but they might not be quite as good as some of your more thin skin varieties that tend to be better for just grabbing off and slicing and eating and enjoying because of that thicker skin. And then the fourth and final thing that you can do to reduce the chance of your tomato cracking has to do with the fact that you're waiting too late to harvest. We talked about in the very first part how we've all had that moment where we look at our plants and we say, maybe just one more day, maybe just one more day. And I've often found that the moment I have that thought, maybe just one more day, I've actually written down in my garden journal all the times when I've had my tomatoes crack. And prior to that, when I did my garden walkthrough, I had noted that my tomatoes were looking beautiful. And so what that tells me is that if I was to harvest when I thought maybe just one more day, that is often the best time to harvest. You see, tomatoes that are blushing, they really only get softer. They don't tend to get a whole lot sweeter. Most of the flavor that's developed in a tomato is developed the moment it starts blushing. And so if you leave your tomato on the vine for an extra day, chances are you will only change texture, you won't change much flavor. And so I know that you may have people that disagree with that, but the science does back it up. Most of the flavor is developed at blush. After that point, it's merely simply texture that changes. So what we simply do is we wait for them to almost fully, like I'm not gonna grow a greenhouse style tomato. Like the moment it turns red, I'm not just gonna yank it off the plant, because then it loses a lot of that beautiful texture, that flavor that kind of develops. It gets a little more texturally enticing to eat. It just makes it more of like a vine ripened garden fresh tomato. It gives it that oomph, that the reason why we grow our tomatoes versus buy them from the store. I don't want nasty, bland tomatoes. So I'm not forcing them to come off the moment I see blush. But when the plant has ripened the tomato to about 70, 75%, it's like 1 or 2 days away from being perfect, I will pull it. There might be a teeny tad bit of light kind of greenish yellow hue still left before it turns red completely, but I will have picked that tomato and I will let it fully ripen on the countertop, because then at that point, I'm pulling it off before the skin gets so thin that it can crack. It also reduces the chance of something happening to it, like a bird coming by and pecking it, because a bird also wants the moisture from that tomato. So if you have problems with birds pecking holes in your fruit, try picking them just a little bit early as well. Or squirrels, if squirrels are giving you problems, squirrels want that tomato juice just the same as you do. They want that nice tomato. And so by picking it just a little bit early, just a little bit, can make a huge difference with preventing them from cracking. And so those are all the reasons and ways that you can prevent your tomatoes from cracking. I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you all learned something new. If you did, make sure to hit that like button and let me know in the comments box down below if this has helped in any way. And also, if you apply some of these tips, let me know if they've helped you. Come back to this video in a month and let me know if they really helped you. I love to know that I'm assisting gardeners and making their life easier and helping you to have more fun in the garden. And with that, hopefully you all enjoyed. Share this video with a friend, because I guarantee you they'll love it as well. And we'll catch you all on the next episode. As always, this is Luke from the My Gardener channel, reminding you to grow bigger. Take care. Bye. Hey, thank you so much for watching today's video. I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed, consider clicking this one. You'll probably enjoy it just as much. I want to thank you for your viewership, because without it, this channel would not be as amazing as it is. Also, if you haven't subscribed, consider subscribing. It's free, and we upload videos every Monday, Wednesday, or Friday. We also have vegetable seeds, fertilizer, or tools. If you need any of those, consider visiting mygardener.com. Links will be in the description box below. We've got you covered. And as always, we'll see you all in the garden. Take care.